My name is Whitney. I'm 28 and I've always been the family disappointment, at least according to my parents. As a software engineer in Seattle, my success meant nothing compared to my cousins' nursing careers and early marriages. That evening, I pulled into my childhood driveway for a rare family dinner heart pounding with hope, despite knowing better. Within minutes, the familiar sneer started. "How does it feel being useless?" Dad asked while Mom nodded in agreement. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from and hit subscribe because what I did next completely changed my family dynamic forever. I grew up in Millfield, Ohio, a town where most people followed predictable paths. My father Thomas worked as a factory manager at the local manufacturing plant, a job he'd held for nearly 30 years. My mother Diane taught second grade at Millfield Elementary. They were respected community members with traditional values and equally traditional expectations for their daughters. From my earliest memories, my parents made their expectations crystal clear. I would become a nurse or teacher. Like my mother, marry a local boy with steady employment, buy a house within a 10-mile radius of them, and produce grandchildren before my 30th birthday. This was success as they defined it. "Whitney, pay attention to your cousin Amanda," my mother would say at family gatherings when I was just 8 years old. "She already knows she's going to nursing school. She has direction." I remember watching 11-year-old Amanda playing with dolls while I sat programming simple games on our family's outdated computer. Even then, I knew my interests pulled me in a different direction, but whenever I showed my parents what I'd created, they'd exchange knowing glances. "That's nice, honey," my father would say with thinly disguised indifference. "Just don't spend too much time playing around on that thing. Computers are for boys." Their dismissal of my passions became a constant theme throughout my childhood. During dinner conversations, my accomplishments were minimized, while my younger sister Natalie's conformity was celebrated. When I won the state mathematics competition in 6th grade, my father nodded briefly before changing the subject to my cousin Michael's baseball game. When I was accepted into the gifted program for science and technology in 8th grade, my mother sighed and said, "I hope this doesn't make you too bookish for boys to like you." Despite their discouragement, I continued excelling academically. My bedroom became my sanctuary, where I taught myself programming languages from library books and online tutorials. Our family computer was ancient, but a kind teacher allowed me to stay after school to use the newer computers in the lab. I created my first functional app at 15, a scheduling program that the school administration actually implemented. When my parents heard about it from other teachers at a school function, they seemed momentarily surprised. "Well, isn't that something?" my father said. "But computers are just a fad job. Those tech companies hire kids now, but they'll replace them with someone younger next year." By my junior year of high school, I was secretly applying to colleges with strong computer science programs, knowing my parents expected me to attend the local community college like my cousins. When acceptance letters arrived, I hid them in a hollowed-out calculus textbook. The scholarship letter from Washington University was impossible to hide. It offered a full ride based on my academic performance and a coding competition I'd won. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents the explosion was exactly what I'd feared. "Seattle!" my mother exclaimed, her face paling. "That's clear across the country. You can get a perfectly good education here." "What kind of daughter abandons her family?" my father added, his face reddening. "This is about family loyalty, Whitney." "I need to do this for me," I explained, trying to make them understand. "This is an incredible opportunity." "You're being selfish," my mother said. "Amanda got her nursing degree right here and already has a good job at the hospital. And a fiancé," my father added pointedly. The argument lasted for weeks. When moving day approached and they realized I wouldn't back down, my father delivered his parting shot. "You'll fail out there on your own," he said coldly. "And when you do, don't expect us to bail you out. Real adults stick close to family." I left for Seattle with those words ringing in my ears, determined to prove him wrong. Over the next 4 years of college, our communication dwindled to obligatory holiday phone calls and occasional stilted visits. Each time I shared an academic achievement, it was met with comments about local girls getting engaged or landing stable jobs in healthcare. By graduation, I had accepted that nothing I achieved would ever measure up in their eyes. The distance between us had grown from physical miles to an emotional chasm that seemed increasingly impossible to bridge. College was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language and valued my abilities. But the transition wasn't easy. I'd arrived at Washington University with technical skills, but crippling self-doubt conditioned by years of having my passions dismissed. During freshman orientation, I sat alone in the corner of the computer science welcome mixer, watching other students confidently network with professors. A tall woman with bright red glasses approached me. "You look exactly how I felt my first day," she said, introducing herself as Professor Kaminsky, like you're waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder and tell you there's been a mistake. Her kindness broke through my shell. Soon I was sharing my background and dreams, including the apps I developed. "Whitney," she said after listening, "you don't belong in the introductory class. I'm moving you to advanced programming. Your parents may not understand your talent, but we certainly do." Professor Kaminsky became my first real mentor, guiding me through course selections and introducing me to industry contacts. Through her, I secured an internship at TechSpark, a small but innovative company developing healthcare applications. The first day I received a paycheck with my name on it was transformative. I took myself out for dinner, ordered whatever I wanted, and calculated how long it would take to achieve complete financial independence from my parents. Their grudging contributions to my education expenses had come with constant reminders of their sacrifice, despite my scholarship covering most costs. "They'll never use this against me again," I promised myself, savoring every bite of that meal. Senior year brought job recruiters to campus. My portfolio of projects and strong academic record generated multiple offers. I accepted a position at BrightPath Solutions, a growing startup offering competitive pay and creative freedom. When I called my parents with the news, my father's first question wasn't about the job. "When are you coming back home now that school's done?" "I'm not," I replied. "I've accepted a position here in Seattle." "So this computer phase isn't over yet?" My mother sounded disappointed. "Your cousin Rachel just got engaged to a doctor, you know." I moved into a shared apartment with two classmates and threw myself into proving my worth at BrightPath. The learning curve was steep, but I thrived on the challenges. 12-hour days became normal as I immersed myself in building complex systems. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and within 18 months, I was promoted to project lead. The application my team developed for emergency medical response coordination attracted attention throughout the industry. When I was invited to present our work at a major tech conference, I experienced a moment of validation I'll never forget. Standing on stage, explaining my design to hundreds of industry professionals, I finally felt like I belonged. A senior executive from Vertex Technologies approached me afterward. "We've been watching your work," she said, handing me her card. "When you're ready for the next challenge, call me." 6 months later, I did. The salary Vertex offered was double what I was making, enough to afford my own apartment in a nice Seattle neighborhood. When I signed the contract, I took a picture of it and nearly sent it to my parents before stopping myself. What was the point? They'd find a way to diminish this too. Instead, I channeled my energy into creating a fulfilling life. My apartment became my sanctuary, decorated exactly how I wanted. I made friends who celebrated my successes rather than undermining them. Weekends filled with hiking the beautiful Pacific Northwest trails, attending tech meetups, and building meaningful connections. On my 26th birthday, my team surprised me with cake and cards. My manager announced my promotion to senior engineer, a position I'd worked relentlessly to earn. That night, in a moment of optimism, I called my parents to share the news. "Senior engineer," my father repeated, confusion evident in his voice. "Is that like a supervisor or something?" "It's a big promotion," I explained. "I'll be leading larger projects and mentoring junior engineers." "Well, that's nice, honey," my mother responded. "But have you thought more about finding a position back here? The hospital always needs people in their IT department." That night, I started therapy. Dr. Martinez helped me recognize the pattern of seeking validation from people incapable of giving it. "Your parents have a limited view of success," she explained. "You're trying to win a game where the rules are designed for you to lose." Through weekly sessions, I began healing the wounds of never feeling good enough. I learned to celebrate my accomplishments without needing external validation. I recognized the chosen family I'd built around me, friends and mentors who genuinely supported my path. Still, during vulnerable moments, I'd find myself drafting emails to my parents, detailing my achievements in hopes this time would be different. I rarely sent them, protecting myself from the inevitable disappointment of their response. 3 years after graduation, the economy took a severe downturn. Tech companies in Seattle weathered the storm relatively well, but manufacturing towns like Millfield were devastated. The first hint of trouble came through my sister Natalie, who still lived nearby our parents. "Whitney, I'm worried about Mom and Dad," she said during one of our weekly calls. "The factory announced layoffs and Dad's really stressed, and Mom's school district is cutting budgets." My immediate response was concern. Despite our complicated relationship, I didn't want my parents to suffer. "Do they need financial help? I can send money." "You know Dad would never accept it," Natalie sighed. "He said he'd rather work 3 jobs than take handouts from his children." "It's ridiculous, but you know how stubborn he is." Over the following weeks, Natalie kept me updated. Dad had survived the initial round of layoffs but took a significant pay cut. Mom's teaching position was reduced to part-time. They'd refinanced their mortgage at a terrible interest rate out of desperation. "They maxed out their credit cards paying for a new furnace last winter," Natalie revealed. "And now the car needs expensive repairs. They're drowning, Whitney, but they won't admit it." I felt torn between wanting to help and knowing my assistance would likely be rejected as worthless computer money. Still, I couldn't sit by and watch them struggle. Through careful questioning of Natalie, I gathered information about their specific financial troubles. Then I contacted their utility companies and anonymously paid several months ahead on their accounts. When Natalie reported their confusion at suddenly having credits on their bills, I felt a small satisfaction. At least I could help in some way, even if they didn't know it was me. The situation deteriorated when my father developed back problems but refused to see a doctor because of the cost. Their house, once meticulously maintained, was showing clear signs of neglect from deferred maintenance. The roof needed repairs before winter, and the ancient water heater was failing. Meanwhile, my career continued advancing. Vertex Technologies promoted me to senior engineer with another substantial salary increase. I now earned more annually than my parents had in their best years, combined with excellent benefits and stock options. The financial advice I received from the company's wealth management team helped me build significant savings and investments. One evening, I received a call from Natalie that changed everything. "Dad collapsed at work today," she said, her voice shaking. "He's okay, but the doctor says it's exhaustion and stress. The factory is closing completely next month and they'll lose their health insurance. Mom's having panic attacks about losing the house." "I'm sending money right now," I insisted. "Whitney, they won't take it." Natalie sounded defeated. "I tried to give them some of my savings and Dad actually shouted at me. But I think if you came home and talked to them in person, it might make a difference." The thought of facing their disapproval in person made my stomach clench. 2 years had passed since my last visit home, a tense Christmas gathering where my father had asked if I was still playing with computers for a living. "What good would it do?" I asked. "They've never respected my choices or my career." "Because they don't understand it," Natalie argued. "They're from a different generation. But Whitney, they're scared now in a way I've never seen. Their pride is crumbling. This might be the moment they finally listen." After a long conversation with Dr. Martinez, I made my decision. I would return home not seeking validation but offering help from a position of strength. I arranged with Natalie to come for dinner the following weekend, giving no advance notice to my parents. "I just hope you're prepared for how they might react," Natalie warned. "I'm not the insecure college student anymore," I replied with more confidence than I felt. "I know my worth now even if they don't." As I packed for the trip, I made one additional preparation. I visited my bank and had them prepare a cashier's check. The amount made even the bank manager raise his eyebrows. "That's quite a sum," he commented. "Special occasion, family business." I replied, simply securing the check in my wallet. With everything arranged, I boarded my flight to Ohio, equal parts determined and anxious about the confrontation to come. The familiar streets of Millfield looked smaller somehow as I drove my rental car through town. I passed landmarks from my childhood, each evoking complicated emotions. The library where I discovered programming books, The high school where teachers had encouraged my talents, while classmates teased me for being different. The park where my father once told me technology was just a passing fad, after I excitedly shared news about a software innovation. As I turned onto my parents' street, my heart rate accelerated. The modest two-story house where I grew up appeared shabbier than I remembered. The once immaculate lawn needed mowing, and the shutters my father used to paint every spring were peeling. The concrete steps leading to the front door had a visible crack. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my overnight bag and approached the house. Before I could knock, the door swung open. My mother stood there looking older than her 56 years. New lines creased her forehead, and her hair had more gray than I remembered. "Whitney," she said with obvious surprise. "Natalie had kept my visit secret as planned. We weren't expecting you. I was in Cincinnati for work and thought I'd stop by." I lied smoothly. "Is this a bad time?" "Of course not," she replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Your father will be pleased." That was another lie. We both knew it. I followed her inside, noting more signs of their financial strain. The furniture was the same from my childhood, now visibly worn. The thermostat was set lower than comfort would dictate, likely to save on heating costs. My father emerged from the kitchen moving more stiffly than I remembered. His face registered surprise before settling into a careful neutrality. "So the prodigal daughter returns," he said, attempting humor that fell flat. "What brings you back to the real world?" The subtle dig was so familiar, it almost made me smile. "Some things never changed." "Just visiting," I replied, giving him a brief hug that felt awkward. "Thought I'd surprise you." "Well, you've certainly done that," he gestured vaguely. "Your mother was just putting dinner together. Nothing fancy like what you're used to in Seattle, I'm sure." "I'm not expecting fancy, Dad." My mother cleared her throat. "I'm making pot roast. It'll be ready in about an hour. Why don't you get settled in your old room?" My childhood bedroom had been converted to a sewing room years ago, but a twin bed remained along one wall. I placed my bag on it and took a moment to compose myself. Family photos lined the wall, carefully arranged to minimize my absence. Pictures of Natalie's graduation holidays I'd missed, and several of my cousins' weddings dominated the display. Downstairs, I heard the front door open and Natalie's voice. Relief washed over me at having an ally present. I rejoined the family as my mother fussed over table settings. "I hope you don't mind using the everyday dishes," she said pointedly. "The good china is packed away." "Mom, everyday dishes are perfect," I assured her, trying to diffuse the tension. Dinner was served with an air of ceremony that emphasized the effort involved. My mother detailed the grocery specials that had made the meal possible, making sure I understood the sacrifices involved. "I had to go to 3 different stores to find everything at a reasonable price," she explained. "Everything costs so much these days you wouldn't believe it." As we ate, my father dominated the conversation with stories about local people who had found success through traditional paths. The Johnson's son who took over his father's insurance business, the Miller's daughter who married a dentist and just had her 3rd child. "And did you hear about Katie Thompson?" my mother asked pointedly, looking at me. "She just made nursing supervisor at the hospital. She's your age, isn't she? And already has such a stable career." I nodded politely, pushing food around my plate. When the conversation lulled, I attempted to share some news about my recent promotion and the team I now led. My father's eyes glazed over mid-explanation. "That's nice," he interrupted. "But real success isn't about fancy titles, it's about building something that lasts. Family, community, things that matter when the trends change." My mother nodded in agreement. "Speaking of family, are you seeing anyone special?" "You're 28 now, Whitney. The good ones get taken early." "I'm focused on my career right now," I replied, a response that triggered an exchange of knowing looks between my parents. "And what exactly do they pay you for this computer work?" my father asked suddenly. "Enough to live on, I hope." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Before I could answer, he continued, "Because real security comes from practical skills. If this tech bubble bursts, what will you have to fall back on? The industry is actually very stable." I began, but my mother cut in. "You know the hospital always needs people in their IT department. You could still get training as a nurse and have that to fall back on. A practical skill." I noticed their worn clothing then. My father's sweater had been darned at the elbow. My mother's slacks were faded from too many washes. Despite their financial straits, their pride remained intact, fueled by their certainty that their life choices were superior to mine. When Natalie arrived halfway through dinner, the tension temporarily eased. She hugged me tightly before taking her seat, her expression conveying silent support. Whitney was just telling us about her computer job. My father said the slight emphasis on computer, making it sound frivolous. Natalie jumped in. Whitney's not just working with computers, Dad. She's a senior engineer at one of the biggest tech companies in the country. She leads teams of developers. Is that right? My father replied skeptically. And what exactly does that involve playing video games all day? I started to explain the critical infrastructure my team maintained when he waved his hand dismissively. Meanwhile, your cousins are doing real work, helping people, contributing to the community. Whitney helps people too, Natalie defended. The systems she builds are used in hospitals across the country. My mother sighed. It's just not the same as being there in person, dear. Technology is so impersonal. As dinner concluded, my father brought up the factory closure, describing the impact on families he knew. For the first time, I detected vulnerability beneath his bravado. Good men worked hard all their lives, he said, voice tight. Now they're scrambling for minimum wage jobs with no benefits. This was my opening. That sounds really difficult. How are things going for you and Mom? Their discomfort was immediate. My mother busied herself collecting plates while my father's posture stiffened. We're managing, he said curtly. We don't need handouts if that's what you're asking. I wasn't suggesting that, I replied calmly. I'm just concerned. Well, concern doesn't pay the mortgage, does it? He snapped, fatigue and stress breaking through his facade. How does it feel, Whitney, being useless to your family when we really need help? The room fell silent. My mother froze plates in hand. Natalie's eyes widened in shock. Thomas, my mother finally whispered, not quite a rebuke, but the words hung in the air between us, a perfect distillation of everything they'd ever made me feel. Useless, inadequate, a disappointment. The silence following my father's words was deafening. I felt a familiar churning in my stomach, that childhood sensation of never being good enough. But alongside it was something new, clarity, and with it a strange calm. I looked at my father's reddening face, my mother's embarrassed expression, and Natalie's concerned eyes. Time seemed to slow as memories flashed through my mind. Every dismissal, every comparison to cousins, every suggestion that my chosen path was frivolous. Whitney, your father didn't mean, my mother began weakly. Yes, he did, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. He's always meant it. My father shifted uncomfortably but didn't deny it. His jaw was set in that familiar, stubborn line I'd known all my life. You think I don't know what's happening here? I continued. Natalie's kept me informed. The factory closure, Mom's reduced hours, the second mortgage, the credit card debt. That's our business, my father said sharply. Not yours. Is it? I asked. Because family problems are family business, isn't that what you always taught us? Real family members support each other. Isn't that right, Dad? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze when his own words were turned back on him. The difference is, I continued, when I needed support for my choices, you decided my path wasn't worthy of respect. But now that you need help, suddenly family obligation matters again. My mother set down the plates she'd been holding, her hands trembling slightly. Whitney, we've always wanted what's best for you. We just worried about your future in such an unstable field. I looked at her directly. Did you ever once research what software engineers actually do, or what they earn? Or did you just decide it wasn't as valuable as nursing because it didn't fit your understanding of real work? Her silence was answer enough. You've never respected my choices, I said, keeping my voice even. You've been waiting for me to fail for 10 years so you could say I told you so. Even tonight, you couldn't resist belittling my career while you're sitting here drowning in debt. Now wait just a minute. My father started, anger rising in his voice. We raised you, put food on the table, put you through college. My scholarship put me through college, I corrected. The scholarship you tried to convince me not to accept. We wanted you close to home, my mother interjected. You wanted me small, I countered. Manageable. following a path you understood. Every time I've achieved something, you found a way to make it seem insignificant compared to someone else's more traditional success. Tears were forming in my mother's eyes now. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "So now you've made it big in the city and come back to rub our noses in it," he demanded. "While we're struggling to keep our home." "No, Dad. I came back because despite everything I care about you. Both of you." I took a deep breath. "And because I'm in a position to help. We don't need your charity," he snapped automatically. "It's not charity. It's family." I reached for my purse hanging on the back of my chair. "You taught me that family helps family remember." The room went still as I opened my wallet and removed the cashier's check. I placed it on the table, then with deliberate slowness, slid it across toward my father. His eyes dropped to the check, then widened in shock as he registered the amount. My mother leaned over to look, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's," she whispered, unable to complete the sentence. "Enough to pay off your mortgage," I finished for her, "and the credit card debt, and buy a reliable car and fix the roof." My father stared at the check, his expression cycling rapidly through disbelief, shock, and something that looked suspiciously like shame. "I can't accept this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you can," I replied simply. "Because it's not about your pride anymore. It's about your health, your home, and your future." "But how can you afford—" My mother trailed off, still staring at the figure on the check. "Because that computer hobby you dismissed, it pays me more annually than both your salaries combined at their peak. I'm not just a senior engineer, I lead a division developing critical infrastructure that hospitals nationwide rely on. My team includes 30 engineers. My last performance bonus alone was bigger than this check." They looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Natalie reached under the table and squeezed my hand in silent support. "I don't expect this money to change how you feel about my choices," I continued. "But maybe it will help you understand that different paths can lead to success, even ones you don't understand." My father reached for the check with trembling fingers, still seemingly unable to process its reality. "There are conditions," I said, causing him to pause. "First, I need to know that you're going to use this to stabilize your situation. Second, no more dismissing my career or life choices. If you can't be supportive, then at least be respectful." "Whitney, My father started, then stopped uncharacteristically at a loss for words. "We never meant to make you feel—" my mother began. "Yes, you did," I interrupted gently. "You meant every comparison, every dismissive comment. You wanted me to doubt myself enough to conform to your expectations. But it didn't work. Instead, it just pushed me to prove you wrong." The admission hung in the air between us, a truth too raw to deny. "I'm sorry," my father said finally, the words sounding unpracticed on his tongue. "I didn't understand." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the years of undermining, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a beginning. "So am I," I replied. "Sorry that it took a financial crisis for us to have an honest conversation." The atmosphere in the dining room transformed completely after the check changed hands. The stiff postures and defensive tones gradually gave way to something more genuine. My mother made coffee, her movements less agitated, while my father sat at the table looking at the check as if it might disappear. "I still don't understand," he said finally. "How did you— when did you—" "Success doesn't always look like what you expect, Dad," I replied. "The tech industry rewards problem solvers. That's what I've always been good at, even when you thought I was just playing on the computer." He nodded slowly. "I guess I never really understood what you actually do for work." It was perhaps the first time he'd admitted not knowing something rather than dismissing what he didn't understand. "Would you like me to explain it?" I offered. To my surprise, he nodded. "I would, actually." Over coffee, I explained in accessible terms how my team built and maintained critical infrastructure that hospitals relied on for everything from patient records to emergency response coordination. I described the responsibility of leading dozens of engineers and managing multi-million-dollar budgets. "So you're like a manager?" he asked, trying to connect it to something familiar. "More like a technical director," I explained. I make decisions about how systems are built and how they work together. My mother, who had been listening quietly, asked, "And they pay you well for this?" "Very well," I confirmed. "Plus, stock options bonuses and excellent benefits." "But you work such long hours," she said, remembering my rare calls home during the early years of my career. "I did at first establishing myself. Now I have more balance. The compensation reflects the value I create, not just the hours I put in." Natalie, who had been silently supportive throughout, asked, "Do you think you could show Mom and Dad your apartment sometime? Maybe they could visit Seattle." The suggestion hung in the air like a peace offering. My parents exchanged uncertain glances. "I'd like that," I said cautiously. "When you're ready." "I've never been to the West Coast," my mother admitted. "It always seems so far away." "It is far," I acknowledged. "But planes make the distance manageable." My father cleared his throat. "About the check, Whitney. I don't know how to—" "You don't need to say anything," I interrupted. "Just use it to get back on solid ground." "We will," my mother promised. "No more refinancing or credit card debt. And I'd like to help Natalie too," I added, looking at my sister. "I know you've been wanting to finish your degree." Natalie's eyes widened. "Whitney, you don't have to." "I want to," I insisted. "Family helps family, right, Dad?" He nodded, the irony of his own mantra coming back around not lost on him. "Right," he agreed quietly. For the first time that evening, the conversation flowed naturally. My mother asked genuine questions about my life in Seattle, my friends, my apartment. My father, still processing the revelations of the evening, occasionally joined in with hesitant questions about my work. It wasn't perfect. Years of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in one evening. But it was a start, a crack in the foundation of misconceptions that had defined our relationship for a decade. When I left for my hotel that night, my mother hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry we didn't understand," she whispered. "I'm trying to now." My father's handshake was firm. "Thank you," he said simply, emotion making his voice rough. "Not just for the money, for not giving up on us completely." Driving back to the hotel, I called my friend Jessica, who had been my emotional support through years of family tension. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "Surprisingly productive," I replied. "There was the usual dismissal, then a confrontation, then something shifted." "The check worked its magic," she asked. "It wasn't really about the money," I explained. "It was about them finally seeing me as successful on my own terms. The money just made it impossible to ignore." "Are you okay?" Jessica knew how emotionally draining these visits could be. "I think I am," I realized, somewhat surprised. For the first time, I feel like they actually saw me. Not who they wanted me to be, but who I actually am. I decided to stay an extra day to help my parents make arrangements with the bank and set up a realistic financial plan moving forward. It was one thing to provide the funds, another to ensure they used them wisely. That night in my hotel room, I reflected on the dinner that had changed everything. The journey wasn't over, but a new chapter had definitely begun. 6 months after that fateful dinner, I returned to Millfield for Thanksgiving. The difference was immediately apparent. My parents' home had a new roof, fresh paint, and the lawn was neatly trimmed. My father met me at the door with a genuine smile instead of a guarded expression. "You're looking well," he said, and I could tell he meant it. Inside, the atmosphere was warmer both literally and figuratively. The thermostat was set at a comfortable temperature, and family photos now included several printouts of pictures I'd sent from Seattle. Most surprisingly, my father had framed an article from a tech publication that mentioned my team's healthcare initiative. "Your mother found it online," he explained somewhat sheepishly when he noticed me looking at it. "She's learned how to Google you." The thought of my technophobic mother researching me online made me smile. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Financial stability had clearly reduced their stress levels. My mother had regained some of her natural cheerfulness, and my father's health had improved significantly now that he was getting proper medical care. They'd paid off all their debts as promised and purchased a modest but reliable car. Our communication over the past months had been transformed. What began as awkward weekly check-in calls had evolved into more natural conversations. My father had even created an email account sending occasional messages that were brief but increasingly personal. "Whitney, could you show me how to set up that video call thing you mentioned?" My mother asked after dinner. "I'd like to see your apartment when you get back." "You mean Zoom?" I asked, surprised by her interest in technology. "That's the one. Your father and I thought maybe we could do regular video calls. It's not the same as having you here, but it would be nice to see your face more often." This simple request represented a monumental shift. Rather than expecting me to conform to their world, they were making efforts to connect with mine. "I'd really like that," I said sincerely. When my father asked me to explain a news story about data security he'd seen on television, I realized he was making a genuine effort to understand aspects of my world. His questions were thoughtful rather than dismissive. "So your job involves protecting information like that?" he asked. "Part of it, yes," I confirmed. "My team builds systems that keep patient data secure while making it accessible to the right healthcare providers." He nodded with what looked like respect. "That's important work." Those 4 words casually offered meant more to me than he could possibly know. Natalie had enrolled in online courses to complete her business degree with my financial support. She seemed happier and more confident, having escaped the expectation that she would follow our cousins' paths. "I've been accepted to the business program at Ohio State," she announced during dinner. "I'll be able to transfer most of my credits." "That's wonderful, honey," our mother said with genuine enthusiasm. The contrast to how she'd responded to my college ambitions wasn't lost on me. "We're proud of you," our father added, glancing at me. "Both of you." The therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had prepared me for this transition. "Healing isn't linear," she'd warned me. "There will be progress and setbacks. Old patterns don't disappear overnight." She was right. There were still moments of tension, instances where my parents slipped into old habits of comparison or misunderstanding. But the difference now was their willingness to catch themselves and recalibrate. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected invitation. My company had nominated me for an industry award recognizing innovation in healthcare technology. The ceremony would be held in Chicago, much closer to Ohio than Seattle. "Would you want to come?" I asked my parents during our weekly video call, trying to keep my expectations measured. "It's kind of a big deal in my field." To my surprise, they didn't hesitate. "We wouldn't miss it," my father said firmly. Watching them enter the hotel ballroom on the night of the ceremony, dressed in their finest clothes, I felt an unfamiliar emotion. Pride not in my accomplishments, but in how far we'd come as a family. When my name was called and I took the stage to accept the award, I spotted them in the audience. My mother was openly crying, and my father was recording the moment on the smartphone he'd finally learned to use. They gave me a standing ovation, clearly understanding for the first time the respect my work commanded in my professional world. At the reception afterward, my father introduced himself to my colleagues with none of his former dismissiveness. "I'm Whitney's dad," he said, the pride evident in his voice. Later that night, he said something I never thought I'd hear. "I was wrong about your career choice, Whitney. I didn't understand it, so I assumed it wasn't valuable. I'm sorry for that." The simple acknowledgement healed something deep within me. Not completely, but significantly. Back in Seattle, I met someone who valued both my career and my independence. When I nervously mentioned my parents during our 5th date, expecting to share stories of family tension, I was surprised to find myself describing our improving relationship instead. "They're trying," I explained. "It's not perfect, but it's better." When I introduced them via video call, my parents were genuinely welcoming. There were no pointed questions about marriage or children, no comparisons to cousins who had followed more traditional paths. "Anyone who makes Whitney happy is welcome in our family," my mother said, words I couldn't have imagined her saying a year earlier. The healing journey continues. Some weeks are better than others. Old patterns occasionally resurface, but we now have tools to address them directly, rather than allowing resentment to build. The most important lesson I've learned is that standing in your truth, even when it's difficult, is sometimes the only way to create space for authentic connection. My parents couldn't respect what they didn't understand, and they couldn't understand what they weren't willing to see. The check that silenced them at dinner wasn't about money. It was tangible proof of a reality they'd been denying for years. It forced them to reconcile their perception with the truth, creating an opening for genuine change. I no longer need their validation to feel successful. That's perhaps the most valuable outcome of our journey. I know my worth independent of their ability to recognize it. But there's comfort in knowing that the gap between us has narrowed, that we're building a relationship based on who we actually are, rather than who we expected each other to be. If you're facing similar challenges with family who don't understand your path, I hope my story offers some encouragement. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stand firmly in your truth, even when it creates temporary discomfort. Real respect can't be demanded, only earned through consistent authenticity. Have you ever had to prove your worth to family members who dismissed your choices? What did you do? Leave a comment below and share your experience. And if my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful transformations. Thank you for listening, and remember that your path doesn't need anyone's approval to be valuable.